Monday, I shared why I created my framework for connected leadership. Here is what I didn't tell you, and what most leadership development completely misses. The 3 specific ways even brilliant leaders sabotage their own effectiveness without even realizing it. I'm Dr. Cara, and today I'm revealing exactly what 3 leadership blind spots are, why traditional leadership trainings don't address them, and how to spot them in your own leadership before they derail your best intentions. Here's the thing. You can master strategy, nail your metrics, and check every leadership development box. But if you're operating from these 3 disconnections, you're working 3 times harder for half the impact. And your team feels it. Let me paint a picture that might feel uncomfortably familiar. It's Tuesday at 3. You're in back-to-back meetings, your phone is buzzing with urgent requests, and you just got an email that makes your stomach drop. Your first thought, I need to get control of this situation. Sound familiar? Here's what's fascinating and what took me years of experience and research across 4 continents to understand. That instinct to control is actually the first sign that you're operating from disconnection rather than leadership strength. After leading for years and working with several leaders, from directors of nursing, making life or death decisions, to CEOs, managing organizational crises, I discovered something that completely changed how I understand leadership effectiveness. The leaders who thrive aren't the ones who have the most control. They're the ones who know exactly what they cannot control and have mastered their response to uncertainty. Through my work in international psychology, my years in health system strengthening, and overseeing national programs, I kept seeing the same pattern. 3 specific disconnections that turn capable leaders into exhausted micromanagers. According to Gallup studies, managers account for at least 70% of the variance in employee engagement. But let's unpack what that really means. This isn't about job titles. It is about the reality that when you have formal authority over others, your approach fundamentally shapes their experience. Management is about the position you hold. Leadership is about how you show up in that position. The power differential is real. You influence workloads, career paths, and daily interactions. With that influence comes a responsibility to choose. Will you simply manage, or will you lead? Think about that. 70% of whether your team is engaged, motivated, and performing at their best largely comes down to whether you use your positional authority to control or to connect, to prove your worth or to recognize theirs, to demand perfection or to embody grace. The research confirms what effective leaders know. It's not the title that transforms teams. It's how you choose to lead from whatever position that you're in. So let me break down the 3 pillars of my framework for connected leadership. Not just what they are, but why each one directly addresses a leadership blind spot that's probably affecting your effectiveness right now. Last week, we discussed disconnection is worth confusion. Honestly, this one took me the longest to figure out in my leadership journey. Here's how it shows up. You make decisions based on how they'll be perceived rather than what's the most effective. You exhaust yourself trying to prove that you belong instead of contributing from a place of confidence. Remember my avocado story from last Monday? Your worth as a leader doesn't change based on whether your last presentation was flawless, whether your team loves every decision you make, or whether that stakeholder finally returns your calls. Just like that avocado's value was constant regardless of external factors or opinions, your leadership value is intrinsic. Yet here's where it gets real. When you don't operate from inherent worth, you start seeking validation through control, perfection, and approval seeking. You micromanage because you think their success proves your worth. You avoid difficult conversations because you're afraid of being disliked. You say yes to everything because you're trying to demonstrate your value. And the result? Your team doesn't get your best thinking. They get your most fearful thinking. Research from Harvard Business School shows leaders operating from validation seeking make decisions significantly slower and change their minds more often. They're not leading from strategy, they're leading from insecurity. When you truly recognize your worth, when you lead from I belong here and have something valuable to contribute, everything changes. You make faster decisions because you trust your judgment. You have difficult conversations because you know your relationships can handle the truth. You empower others because their success doesn't threaten your value. And while we're here, I want to serve you a side dish of standing in your truth with this pillar. For recognizing your worth is actually the greatest reflection of knowing your truth. When you know your worth, you stop what Brene Brown calls hustling for worthiness. You stop trying to show up as someone that you're not or prove things that don't honor who you authentically are. In leadership, this looks like stopping the performance. You know, that exhausting act where you pretend to have all the answers. You mirror other leaders' styles instead of developing your own, where you say yes to opportunities that drain you because you think that's what good leaders do. Standing in your truth means leading from your authentic strengths, values, and perspectives, not the version of you that you think others expect you to be. Standing in your truth means aligning the audio with the visual, meaning your words and your actions are consistent. The second disconnection is what I call the perfectionism prison. This one almost ended my leadership career. Here's how you know you're trapped. You confuse high standards with perfectionism, not realizing that perfectionism actually prevents excellence. I once sent a team deliverable back so marked up with corrections that it looked like it was bleeding. I thought I was maintaining standards. What I was actually doing was teaching my most innovative team members that unpolished ideas were not welcome. Guess what happened to our innovation in our next quarter? Grace isn't about lowering standards. It's about creating the psychological safety that allows people to achieve higher standards. When people feel safe to be imperfect, to learn, to grow, they actually perform better because their energy goes into improvement rather than self-protection. Google's Project Aristotle, their massive study on team effectiveness, found that psychological safety was the #1 predictor of high-performing teams. Not talent, not resources, not strategy. Safety to be human while pursuing excellence. Here's the paradox. When you embody grace, you get better results than when you demand perfection. Why? Because grace creates space for learning, risk-taking, and honest feedback. People share problems before they become crises. They propose innovative solutions they haven't fully polished yet. They tell you what's really happening instead of what they think you want to hear. So grace in practice looks like this. This isn't perfect, and that's exactly where we need to be to make it excellent. It's maintaining high standards while honoring the human learning process. It's the difference between how did you mess this up and what did this teach us about our systems? This was just a taste of the grace pillar. Next week, we are diving deeper into embodying grace. I'll show you exactly how to identify when perfectionism is masquerading as high standards in your leadership and the specific practices that help you create psychological safety without compromising results. The third disconnection is the control illusion. And this is where most leadership development completely misses the mark. We're taught to take control, be in control, maintain control. Here's what 25 years of working in complex systems taught me. The more tightly you grip for control, the less influence you actually have. Think about a basketball player driving to the hoop who suddenly faces a defender. They have two choices. They can force their way through and probably turn the ball over, or pivot, keep one foot planted and adjust their approach to find a better path. The goal stays the same, but the method changes based on new information. That's exactly what conquering control looks like in leadership. You keep one foot planted in your values, your purpose, your commitment to results, but you pivot your approach based on what's actually happening, rather than forcing your original plan through resistance. Here's the irony. The leaders who try to control everything usually control nothing. They're so busy managing every detail that they miss the bigger patterns. They're like the person who's so focused on steering that they forget to check if they're going in the right direction. Studies on leadership effectiveness show something fascinating. Leaders who focus on influence rather than control achieve better team performance and higher employee engagement. Why? Because influence honors people's capabilities while control diminishes them. So conquering control looks like, instead of here's exactly how to do this, you say, here's what we need to achieve. What obstacles do you see? Instead of why didn't you follow the process? You ask, what would make this work better? You shift from managing outcomes to creating conditions for success. And like grace, this is just the beginning of what we'll explore with this pillar. The week following grace, I'll tackle conquering control in depth. I'll share the exact framework I use to distinguish what you can influence and what you can't, plus the pivot strategies that turn resistance into collaboration. Here's where most frameworks fall apart. They give you theory without implementation. That's why I've developed the RPR method: receive, perceive, and respond. This is how you actually apply connected leadership in real time, under pressure, when leadership actually happens. Picture this: you walk into Monday's team meeting and immediately sense tension. Someone is clearly upset, the energy feels off, and you have a full agenda to get through. Your old pattern might be to either ignore the tension and push through the agenda, or immediately try to fix whatever is wrong. With RPR, you pause and receive. You create space to really understand what's actually happening. Not just the words people are saying, but the energy, the nonverbal, what's not being said. You resist the urge to immediately react or fix. Then you perceive. You examine your own internal response. Are you feeling defensive, frustrated, pressed for time? You notice how your filters might be affecting what you're seeing. You ask yourself, what may I be missing here? And finally, you respond. But now your response comes from clarity rather than reaction. Maybe you say, I'm sensing some tension in the room. Should we address what's happening before moving into our agenda? Or maybe you adjust your entire approach based on what you've received and perceived. This process takes about 60 seconds, but it's the difference between reactive management and intentional leadership. It's how you create moments where your team thinks, my leader really gets it. Now here's your challenge for the week. I want you to actually do this, not just think about doing this. I'm going to give you 3 experiments to run with your leadership. The worth-based decision challenge. Pick one decision that you have been overthinking or seeking too much input on, and ask yourself, if I completely trusted my expertise and judgment, what would I choose? And then make that choice. Don't run it by 4 additional people. Trust your worth based on wisdom and act on it. The grace under pressure test. The next time someone brings you a problem or makes a mistake, practice grace with backbone. Instead of immediately jumping to solutions or consequences, try this. What did this teach you? Or what would you do differently if this happened again? Maintain your standards while creating space for learning. Pivot practice. When you feel that familiar urge to control, to micromanage, to require approval for small decisions, to need updates on everything, pause and pivot to influence instead. Ask empowering questions rather than giving directive. Something like, what support do you need to make this successful? Or, what obstacles should we anticipate? Try one of these each day for the next 3 days. And here's what I want you to pay attention to. How does it feel different? How do others respond? What changes when you lead from connection instead of control? This coming Monday, we are going deep into the second pillar, embodying grace. And I'm going to show you exactly how to identify when perfectionism is masquerading as high standards in your leadership, and the specific practices that help you create psychological safety without compromising results. And I'll tell you about the moment that I realized my pursuit of excellence was actually crushing my team's innovation, and the grace-based approach that not only restored their creativity, but improved our outcomes and relationship. Between now and Monday, run your 3 experiments and notice what you discover. This framework can transform your everyday leadership, starting with how you show up tomorrow. Here's what I want you to remember. Connected leadership isn't about becoming a different person. It's about systemizing what you already know works. You've had moments where you've led from worth, embodied grace, and influenced through connection. This framework just makes those moments repeatable. Drop a comment and tell me which pillar, worth, grace, or control, resonates most with your current leadership. Remember, connect to yourself so you can elevate and expand for those you lead. The people who trust you to lead them deserve your connected leadership, and you have everything you need to provide it. I'll see you on Monday when we lean into the art of embodying grace. Until then, lead from connection, one decision at a time.